For decades, Danny Glover was not just an actor audiences admired. He became a familiar face whose performances defined an entire era of Hollywood. That is exactly why recent headlines have left so many fans deeply concerned around the world. When someone who has spent a lifetime inspiring millions begins facing serious personal challenges, the story changes completely. It becomes about far more than fame. It becomes a stark reminder that even our greatest heroes cannot outrun time. And now, what he just confessed about his own mind will break something deep inside you. On the 1st of July in the year 2026, Danny Glover shared news that shocked millions of people. The 79-year-old actor, whose career inspired generations of movie fans, revealed that he had been living with Alzheimer's disease. Rather than allowing rumors to spread or letting someone else tell his story, Danny decided to speak openly himself. He first shared his diagnosis in an interview with People magazine before appearing later that morning on The Today Show with Lester Holt. For many fans, it was incredibly difficult to watch a man known for his immense strength speak so honestly about the greatest challenge of his life. But there was a hidden detail about this announcement that left the studio completely silent. From the very beginning of the interview, it was clear this was not going to be an easy conversation. Danny did not try to hide his emotions or pretend everything was fine. Instead, he spoke with remarkable honesty about what he has been experiencing lately. He admitted that he was still struggling to fully accept the diagnosis himself. He confessed there were days when it all felt entirely impossible to understand. He explained that his mind often feels caught between moments where his memory seems perfectly normal and other moments that remind him life is changing forever. Some memories remain completely vivid, while others become much harder to reach. It was a deeply personal confession that gave people a rare glimpse into what living with Alzheimer's can truly feel like on the inside. During his emotional interview with Lester Holt, Danny remained incredibly calm and thoughtful. At one point, he said that he could live with the disease in a sense, but he also acknowledged a difficult truth. He knows that Alzheimer's continues to progress over time. He explained that as the disease advances, his life will inevitably change in ways he cannot fully predict. That simple statement carried an enormous amount of emotional weight. It reflected someone facing an uncertain future with complete honesty instead of denial. There was deep sadness in his words, but there was also a quiet kind of courage. What touched so many people was not just the diagnosis itself, but Danny's willingness to be completely vulnerable. In an industry where celebrities often try to appear strong at all times, he chose openness instead. His message quickly became much larger than his own personal story. It reminded families around the world that Alzheimer's affects real people who continue to deserve respect, dignity, and deep understanding. But here is the strangest part of that entire morning, and it happens to be the one thing nobody in Hollywood is talking about openly. This is what really shook people when the news finally broke into the open. Danny was not diagnosed last month. He was not even diagnosed last year. He actually received the devastating news back in 2023. This means for a full 3 years, he sat with this diagnosis in complete silence. The rest of us watched him show up at glamorous red carpets, sign autographs for fans, and record voice work as if nothing at all was wrong. His family knew the truth. His inner circle knew it too. They all quietly agreed to protect him during those difficult years while he tried to understand what was happening inside his own mind. You have to think about what that kind of silence does to a human being over time. Every single time he stepped in front of a camera during those 3 years, he was keeping a massive secret. Every time he laughed at a joke or gave a speech, he was carrying a burden that most people would have shared right away just to feel less alone. But Danny is simply not most people. Those closest to him say he wanted to fully understand the disease before he tried to talk about it in public. He wanted to know exactly what he was fighting before he asked strangers to stand and fight it with him. The timing of this reveal also carries a meaning that has been overlooked by almost everyone. Danny is turning 80 in just a few weeks. Those who know him well say he did not want to enter his 9th decade of life carrying a lie by omission. He also wanted to align himself with the millions of families who are quietly living through this exact same nightmare in living rooms all across the world. He said in his interview that acknowledging the diagnosis was a way of accepting that it was happening to him, while also recognizing the millions of others who suffer from it daily. That single sentence tells you everything you need to know about who Danny Glover really is. Even in the middle of his own personal storm, he was still thinking about the people watching him. He was still thinking about the strangers who would hear his name and finally feel seen for the first time. And that generosity of spirit, that need to turn his own pain into someone else's comfort, has been the story of his entire life. But there is a reason he made that choice, and it goes much deeper than most people realize. Now comes the part where things get truly emotional. When you go back and rewatch some of Danny's public moments from the last few years, the signs were quietly sitting there in plain sight. Fans on social media have already started digging up old interviews and event appearances. They are pointing out little pauses in his sentences, moments where he seemed to lose his train of thought entirely, or times when his answers felt much slower and more careful than they used to be. Most people just chalked all of it up to normal aging. Nobody wanted to think anything worse than that. But this is the cruel truth about Alzheimer's disease. It does not announce itself with a loud scream or a warning bell. It creeps in quietly through the back door of your mind. It starts with small forgotten names, misplaced keys, and repeated stories. It builds slowly over months and years until the person you love is standing right there in front of you but somehow feels miles away. And for a man who spent decades memorizing massive scripts, delivering long monologues, and giving speeches straight from the heart, those first small symptoms must have felt like tiny betrayals from the one part of himself he trusted the most. Danny has not gone into deep detail about which specific symptoms he first noticed. However, medical experts who study this disease say the earliest warning signs almost always include difficulty finding the right word during a conversation, trouble remembering recent events, and small changes in personality or mood. When you look back at his measured pace of speech in recent interviews, and the way he sometimes took a beat before answering a question, it all starts to make painful sense. What makes his story even more layered is his complex health history. Danny lived with epilepsy from childhood into his mid-30s, dealing with seizures that shaped how he moved through the world for decades of his early life. He also faced a severe prostate cancer scare years ago that he handled quietly and privately without ever asking the world to pray for him. So this diagnosis is definitely not the first time his body has forced him to fight for control of it. But this new fight is unlike any of the others he has faced before, and the reason why will make your heart ache. This time, the battlefield is inside the very place where his memories, his craft, and his sense of who he really is all live together. There is something almost unbearably cruel about the shape of Danny's diagnosis when you really think about it. This is a man whose entire career was built on memory itself. Every line he ever delivered as Roger Murtaugh in the iconic Lethal Weapon films had to be pulled cleanly out of his mind under pressure. He did it under bright lights, and under the intense heat of a moving camera. Every scene he shared with Whoopi Goldberg in The Color Purple, every quiet monologue he gave in Beloved, and every dramatic beat in the movies audiences watched in packed theaters depended completely on a memory that could be trusted to show up when called. Actors do not just memorize simple words for a living. They memorize complex emotions, faces, and entire histories of characters who never really existed. They build whole worlds inside their heads and walk through those worlds while the cameras are rolling. Now try to imagine being the kind of actor who did that successfully for over 40 years, and slowly realizing that the one tool you built your whole life around is starting to slip away from you. That is not just a standard health crisis. That is an identity crisis of a kind that most of us will never truly understand. Danny is also deeply known for his voice, that deep, gravelly instrument that turned him into one of the most sought-after voice actors in animation and documentary work. From family films to serious historical projects, that voice always carried authority, warmth, and something that felt almost like a comforting hug traveling through the speakers of your living room. And now, the mind behind that magnificent voice is being slowly rewritten by a disease that currently has no cure. That is the part of his story people are struggling to talk about, because it feels almost too painful to say out loud. Yet here he is, still choosing to speak to us. He is still choosing to sit in front of Lester Holt and be completely honest with the country. He is still choosing to give the public the raw and unfiltered truth about what his days now look like. He is turning his fading memory into a giant spotlight for millions of others whose stories never get told to the world. That level of grace is not something you can teach in a class. And what most people are only now starting to understand is that this diagnosis is hitting a community that has been suffering from Alzheimer's in ways nobody has been willing to name until now. Then comes the angle that nobody in the mainstream news is discussing loud enough, and it may be the most important part of this entire story. Black Americans are twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's disease as their white counterparts. That number should stop the world for a full moment. Yet, most people have absolutely no idea it is even a statistic, because the conversation around this disease has almost always centered on other communities and other faces. Danny stepping into the light might be about to change all of that in a single season. The reasons for this deep disparity are incredibly complicated, and honestly they are painful to face. There are historical health inequalities that go back many generations. There is unequal access to early screening, to top specialists, and to the newest treatments coming out of research labs. There are also environmental factors, chronic stress from systemic issues, higher rates of hypertension and diabetes, all of which quietly raise the risk of cognitive decline over time. And on top of everything else, Black families often face long delays in getting a proper diagnosis because their symptoms are dismissed or misread by doctors who were never trained to see them clearly. Danny Glover was not just any Black actor to come through Hollywood. He was one of the very first Black leading men to headline a major action franchise with a white co-star, back when the industry was still telling itself that audiences would not accept it. He carried the heavy weight of representation on his back for decades without ever making it about himself. And now, whether he planned this or not, he is doing the same thing all over again. He is putting a familiar and beloved face on a disease that has been quietly devastating Black families in silence for years. Advocacy groups have already started using his announcement to push for better research funding, wider outreach in underserved communities, and better cultural training for doctors across the country. His name is once again being tied to a cause much bigger than himself, which, if you know anything about how Danny has lived his life, is completely on brand for him. But the people who have loved him longest are not thinking about statistics right now. They are thinking about him as a person. And the way they are showing up for him behind the scenes is deeply moving. Behind every public announcement like this one, there is a quiet team of loved ones who have been holding the emotional weight for a very long time. Danny has been married to Eliane Cavallero since 2009. And by every account she has been the steady presence in his life through every high and every low of the last decade of his career. Those close to the couple say she has been by his side through every difficult doctor visit, every hard conversation, and every quiet night when the fear started creeping in around the edges of their home. Her name does not show up in tabloids very often, and Danny prefers it that way. Then there is his daughter Mandisa, whom he shares with his first wife, the jazz singer Asake Bamani. Mandisa was born in 1976, and she has grown up watching her father move through the world as an actor, an activist, and a father who was always fighting for something bigger than himself. Now she is watching him fight for himself, and the tenderness of that role reversal is really hard to put into words. She has stayed largely silent in public, which speaks to how much this family values true dignity over media spectacle in an age that constantly rewards the opposite. Danny also has a wider chosen family through decades of intense activism work, from his time with UNICEF to his involvement with the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, to his years at the Trans-Africa Forum where he helped push global human rights forward. He has been close with world leaders and community organizers, poets and factory workers, and all of them have quietly reached out since the news broke into the open. He built a life where he was never truly alone, and that massive network of love is now catching him as he begins the hardest chapter of his story. What is striking is how measured the reactions from Hollywood itself have been in these first few days. There has been no rush of sudden celebrity statements, and no big red carpet tribute yet. Some fans have taken that as coldness, but people who know how tightly Danny protects his privacy say the silence is actually a form of deep respect. His inner circle is honoring the way he wanted this moment handled. They are letting him lead the way. And what he has said about his own future, once you really listen closely, might be the most powerful part of this whole story. If you go back and listen to what Danny told Lester Holt on that Today Show interview, something truly remarkable comes into focus. He was not begging anyone for pity. He was not asking anyone to fix him. He said, in his own quiet way, that he could live with it in a sense. Those beautiful words landed like a soft prayer from someone who has clearly done the hard inner work of accepting a future he did not choose for himself. That is not just basic courage. That is a whole different level of faith in what life still has waiting for him. He also made it very clear that he is not walking away from the world just yet. He has not announced any official retirement. He has not signed off from acting or from public life entirely. He is still completely open to work, still connected to his beloved causes, and still deeply engaged with the people who love him. That is a message worth holding on to tightly, because too many people hear the word Alzheimer's and immediately assume it means the instant end of a person's story. Danny is showing everyone watching that the story keeps going, even when the way of telling it starts to change. You can tell from every word he has spoken over the last few days that he has thought deeply about what comes next. He knows that as the disease advances, the man he sees in the mirror is going to slowly become a stranger to him. He knows that some of his most precious memories of his childhood in San Francisco, of his early theater days, of his own daughter growing up, will fade in ways that will hurt to think about. And yet, he keeps choosing hope over despair. He keeps choosing to speak out. He keeps choosing to matter to the world around him. That is the real gift Danny Glover is giving all of us in this final act of his public life. He is showing millions of people what it looks like to face something truly terrifying without losing your grace or your voice. He is turning what could have been a shameful private secret into a shared human story that has already started to heal people who thought they were suffering completely alone. And in doing that, he is proving something beautiful, that even as memory fades, love and purpose are the two things that Alzheimer's can never fully take away from any of us. What did Danny's honest words about losing his memory make you feel deep inside your heart? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let us know how his courage has touched your own life today.